Welcome to The View, where recruitment, marketing and society comes together.
Hello, this episode I'm chatting with Martyn Redstone from genAssess. He's an expert in AI, and he says AI in recruitment is a little bit like sex at high school. Everybody's talking about it, but not many people are actually doing it. Welcome to The View with me, Neil Armstrong from Tripad, where recruitment, people and purpose come together. Okay, Martyn Redstone from genAssess, thank you very much for joining me to chat today. And I should say that's a slightly limiting title because actually you've got multiple strings to your bows. You're a serial entrepreneur. So why don't you start by telling us a little about what genAssess is and how that fits within your portfolio of other HR and TA tech related roles?
Yeah, absolutely. Many hats, as you can see behind me. So thanks for having me on, Neil. So as I said, Martyn Redstone. Let me tell you kind of all the things that I do, I suppose. So genAssess is my kind of prime focus right now. And what genAssess is a AI skills assessment platform. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, we'll go into it, I'm sure, throughout this conversation, but I've been kind of in the world of AI and recruitment for several years, and I get a really good opportunity to talk to loads of TA leaders about what kind of AI related challenges they're having and what have you. And one of the biggest challenges that came up last year was this paradoxical challenge of we don't want candidates using AI in the recruitment process, but the C-suite have invested a ton of money in AI tools and they want people coming in who can take advantage of those tools. How do we make sure that they're not cheating, but that we know that they can use AI? So that's kind of where the whole idea of genAssess came from, was an opportunity to add an assessment into the recruitment process that watches how people interact with an AI tool. And what I mean by that is they're given a role-specific task to carry out using an AI chatbot like ChatGPT type of chatbot, but it's all kind of on platform. And it's role specific, because that makes more sense. And then what happens from there is they're being watched ultimately, because we're not too bothered about the outcome. We're more bothered about the way that they got there. How do they work with the AI tool? Do they and I have a framework, a proprietary kind of prompting framework that I've been using for years and years and years. It's been working with language models since about 2020. And we assess them across that framework. And we also look at some of the skills that we can infer, like delegation, coaching, problem solving, communication, etc., and assess whether or not that they are good enough to take advantage of AI tools in the workplace. And it is as simple as that. It's three levels of competency. It's needs to improve, good enough, exceptional. As simple as that. And that's
it's interesting that you said at the beginning this paradoxical challenge where companies are investing in this tech, but potentially their teams don't have the skills to use it. We see stuff on LinkedIn and stuff in the media all the time. X proportion of sort of school kids are using ChatGPT to sort their homework. Why percentage of university students are writing their theses and completing exams, and we know within recruitment there's this huge wave of AI generated applications which is overwhelming hiring managers and recruiters. But what's your take on AI usage within recruitment? How much is happening? How competent are we as an industry, as recruitment?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I have a popular phrase that goes along with that answer, which is, from my perspective, AI in recruitment is a lot like sex at high school. A lot of people are talking about it. Not many people are doing it. And I think that really just sums up what's happening in our world. That's not to say that there are, outliers there. But I think sometimes we get lost in our own kind of echo chamber where we think that the whole world is absolutely, some kind of like bionic, recruiter now who just uses AI for everything. And that's not the case. I run a lot of workshops, a lot of educational kind of sessions with TA teams and recruitment businesses across the world. And it's interesting because in a room of 20 people, at least half of them don't feel anywhere close to competent in using tools like ChatGPT and what have you. And, and not even that as a baseline. knowledge of what AI is, what it isn't, all those kind of things. And unfortunately, I think that's where we're kind of being a bit being misguided, being sent down a bit of a dark path when it comes to AI, because we're leaning in on vendors, influencers, those kind of things, where people don't really know what they're talking about a lot of the time. Whether it be don't know about recruitment or don't know about AI, don't know about both. So I think that we're definitely starting to see more adoption happening, especially this year. But we're nowhere close to full-on adoption. I mean, look, in your world, we can look at it from an ATS perspective. We're still talking to businesses who use spreadsheets rather than ATSs, and
Absolutely.
so we're not that far forward.
Yeah. What always, I think that's a really, really good point. And what always fascinates me is, I often think of Microsoft Excel or whatever spreadsheet tool, where I still come across people who type in the total in their calculator, and literally haven't even figured out the basic formula, never mind macros, never mind VLOOKUPs and pivot tables and all that sort of thing. And so when I come across these messages of AI is going to completely transform everything, and if you're not, you're going to get left behind, I look at it and go, well, there's actually still a whole load of people out there processing paper in very manual ways and working from spreadsheets. And when you look at the, coming back to Excel, that the adoption of the features and the power that's there today is still pretty limited. If I think about an example from TribePad, a new customer will come to us with a list of 500 things in their purchasing requirements. We must have talent pooling, we must have this, we must have auto tagging, we must have auto progression. And you win the business, and you go back and you look at that customer 6 months, 9 months later, and they're not using 3/4 of the things that they said were absolutely critical in their purchasing decision. And actually, sometimes they're still using the system in quite a basic way. And I wonder what your thoughts is on, is AI going to solve that problem or exacerbate that problem?
Cool. I think a bit of both, I'll be honest with you, because I think it's up to the individuals, I think it's up to the teams, and I think it's up to the organizations to make any technology transformation a success. And AI is ultimately, generationally, it's going to reshape the world of work, but it's still a technology implementation. And what goes along with that is good change management, good transformation management, good project management. And obviously what goes on with that even more so is good education, upskilling, competency and confidence. So I think that being able to either succeed or fail with AI isn't down to the technology itself. I think it's down to the people around it. And that's, in terms of kind of the stuff I do, that's the second part of my life, is AI and automation consulting and advisory, where I'm helping people do exactly that.
And in terms of that consultancy and advisory, what's the starting point? Like, if somebody says, what does AI in recruitment mean for me, Martyn? Well, take us right back to sort of square one of the board. Where should we be starting? Yeah,
it's a great question. To be honest with you, the common inquiry that I get is, we'd like you to help us solve our problems using AI. That's genuinely an inquiry I had. And we have to start somewhere. And for me, it's, well, let's work out what problems you're trying to solve first. So we take it all the way back to there. We take it back to, what are the problems? What are the challenges? And what do they mean? So we always start there, because I think a lot of the time, especially in our world, in the recruitment technology world, people find a shiny piece of kit, they find a new tool, and they try and look for a problem to match the tool rather than the other way around. So for me, it always starts with, what are you trying to achieve? What's the problem? What's the challenge? And what does it mean if you solve that? So we start there. And a lot of the time, AI isn't the solution, but we have to start with, what are you trying to solve, rather than, what tool are you trying to purchase?
And in terms of that, sort of the problem definition and coming to it, take us a few years back in terms of your background of, recruitment into consultancy and technology. Why are you qualified to help organizations answer those questions and challenges?
Yeah, it's a great question, and a very fair one as well. So I've been working in the industry for 19 years. Started off life as a recruitment consultant in a very well-known recruitment business, Reed, and I was there for eight-ish years. Went through, got my stripes, and absolutely kind of hands-on recruiter in the healthcare teams there. So everything from temp to perm recruitment on that. And then went more into project management is probably the best way of putting it, because at the time the business was going through a bit of a change. Reed Healthcare had just been bought back into the wider Reed company, and there was a lot of kind of integration work and project management, and started to get more involved in that because my background before recruitment is engineering, and I like fixing things, plugging things in, etc., etc. So so kind of got a great name for myself in terms of really getting down into the nitty gritty of what's the problem, what's the challenge, what are we trying to solve, how do we do it, what does it mean, all those kind of things, and just really good kind of integration project management. And that also included going into kind of some of our healthcare branches who weren't performing very well and helping them kind of get back up to scratch. And then the financial crisis hit, but actually what Reed wanted to do as an impact to that was create an innovation team who would report directly into the board and sit across the entirety of the Reed business, and help innovate through the financial crisis. So I was cherry picked to be a part of that team. I was very, very lucky, very honoured to work directly with the board, coming up with some great innovations ranging from property management all the way through to technology, but again could see a recruitment business all the way through. And then, and this is the bit that kind of like got really interesting. So that was a 12-month secondment, finished there, and then decided what I wanted to do next was I loved kind of coming up with new ways of doing things, new solutions. So went into their RPO, MSP kind of business, Reed Consulting, and specialised very much in helping create new solutions for public sector, for RPO and managed services in the public sector, like neutral vendor, etc., etc. So so did that for a couple of years and then left. There was nowhere else for me to go in the business. Wanted to carry on doing some of this really cool stuff, and then went into G4S in their police workforce outsourcing business, and again building new solutions around bringing people in, looking at workforce infrastructure, looking at workforce dynamics, also looking at kind of project load, workforce load, all those kind of things. Again, coming up with new solutions to provide workforce solutions into the UK police services. Unfortunately, was made redundant, and that's when I decided to go into my own kind of consulting world. And I worked across specifically, recruitment technology transformation with both recruitment businesses and in-house. It was an interesting time because at that time, loads was going on in the world. We were seeing the kind of birth of video interviewing. We were seeing the birth of some kind of automation. We were seeing the birth of, lots of kind of different tools. And one of the tools that that stuck out as interesting was chatbots. And I was at the time working with a large central government organisation on a large kind of recruitment project, overseeing the hiring of several hundred people to start same time, same day, different places across the country. And we wanted to hire 750 people to start on the same day. And the organisation wanted to just throw people at it. We need to bring top of the funnel 10,000 people through. We want to just have 30 people sitting there 24/7, screening them, phoning them, etc., etc. I just thought, this is madness. There's got to be a technology for it. And that's when I came across chatbots and thought, this is fantastic. All we want to do is have the same conversation over and over and over again. And this was 2016. And chatbots in our space were at their infancy. Nobody was really, they were just starting to be kind of built, created, and what have you. Early kind of chatbot vendors were just starting in their startup mode, so it was too early. But I kept in touch, kept looking at that technology, and that's when I got the opportunity to go and work for one of the early vendors in the space. And really, it was like first boots on the ground talking about recruitment chatbots,
Yeah.
and absolutely fell in love with it. My like I said, my background's engineering, my degree was computer science. I loved human computer interaction as part of that, all about how people interact with technology around them. So for me, natural language interaction, it all just worked. It clicked nicely. Could see the problems it was trying to solve. And that's when I fell in love with the world of chatbots. And ultimately, I have been doing that ever since for the last 8 years. In one way or another, my specialist focus area is conversational AI and chatbots.
And that, I mean, that area has just boomed in the last few years. So it feels like that, that pace of change is very, very fast. Clearly you're a very technically savvy person. You're passionate about it. You're interested in it. And something I often hear is that, in the recruitment, subdivision of HR, HR are people, and therefore potentially less likely to be tech savvy and more likely to lean into sort of soft skills and relating to people. Do you think that's true? And if so, how can recruiters and HR people become more tech savvy, or do they even need to? What's your take on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's a fallacy in our world that recruitment is a very people-focused process and people like talking to people. I think we need to get over ourselves, ultimately. If we think about everything that we do as consumers, as people, I was in front of a very, very large crowd of recruiters a few months ago, and I asked everyone to stand up if they had booked a holiday in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And the vast majority of the people stood up. I said, remain standing if you booked that with a human travel agent. And everybody bar one sat down.
Yeah.
It's a room of over 100 people. So we're talking less than 1% booked a holiday with a human travel agent. Now, the question is, if it's okay to book a holiday that's worth several £1,000s using technology, not talking to a person, looking at the reviews online, et cetera, and doing it all yourself, why do you think that wouldn't be the same when it comes to finding a job?
Yeah.
And nobody has an answer for that. So I think we need to get over ourselves. I think we need to start designing recruitment processes for the modern consumer, people who want immediacy, convenience, and agency. People who don't want to submit an application form and wait days, weeks, months, years, maybe even never to hear back.
Yeah.
They want to talk to a chatbot because they want to know that they're having that immediate response. Convenience, they don't want to have a screening call with a recruiter 9 to 5 because they're busy 9 to 5. They want to be able to have a screening call with a recruiter when it's right for them, on a channel that's right for them. They might not be comfortable on the phone. They might prefer, voice notes on WhatsApp or direct messaging on Instagram or, whatever, so they want that convenience as well. An agency, they want to be in charge of their own experience and their own process, self-serve portals where they can get an update. Even when we order something, online, we get a text message telling us the exact hour it's going to be. Why can't we have that in recruitment? So I don't think, to go back to your question, I don't think that recruiters and HR people need to be tech savvy. I think they need to understand who their users are.
Yes.
And they need to design the process for those users.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I often think recruitment's this weird role, which is part HR, part marketing, part project management.
Yeah.
There's quite a lot of hats to wear. Coming back to your background with your different hats on, and it's interesting, because if I think back, I don't know, perhaps a year or two ago, the first sort of stories emerged of where Amazon had a completely human-free recruitment process, and I felt like the articles I saw were written to sort of generate horror in the reader of, oh my God, isn't this awful? But as you say, if somebody just literally after a job that fits around their hours and they're going to get good training and good benefits and all that sort of stuff, why it's not necessarily a career for life. It might be something you're expecting to do for 6 months or a year. So I think back to my sort of marketing school days where you have low involvement purchases like buying a bag of crisps and high involvement purchases like buying a car. in some respects, your career is incredibly important, right? For 40, 50 hours a week for the next 5 years, taking you away from your family, incredibly high involvement. On the other hand, it might be a 3 to 6 month job that's much lower involvement. And to your point, if you can spend $5,000 on a holiday booked online, you can buy cars online these days.
Yep.
Why not choose your next job, entirely online?
Exactly. I actually bought my last car on WhatsApp. Genuinely. Yeah, WhatsApp with the dealer. They had a business account. They sent me documents over WhatsApp. It was an amazing experience. Experience. And simple as that, really. Yeah.
And I think people often get hung up on the edge cases. So for example, in video interviewing, and this was pre-pandemic, we had several customers who were using video interviewing really successfully, particularly in early careers, recruitment, graduate placements, that sort of thing, where the volumes were such that these were large organizations like the BBC and Tesco, who had really high brand presence. When they advertised a job, they got literally thousands of people applying for it. And as you say, doing it the old way, throwing lots and lots of humans at the process would just be crazy. And they were getting some fantastic results. But I'd quite often hear the challenge of, but some people don't like video, and but some people want to have it's like, I don't think any solution is ever going to fit 100% of users, and catering for the 5% and not catering for the 95% just means you're going to carry on doing what you've always done, which is having a load of people reading a load of fictional CVs, and therefore being an extremely inefficient and ineffective process.
I agree. I think the world of assessment is ripe for innovation. I don't think that we have cracked it yet. My thought process is, at some point we need to create this kind of utopian situation where we know what the endpoint is. Can we find the right person to do that job? But we should be able to give people options of how they want to do that. Do they want a video interview? Do they want a chatbot interview? Do they want to perform a psychometric test? Do they want to, and let them choose their own adventure? Because if we can plot out, that all of those different things can get us to the right stage and we can have the right kind of outcome, then what's to say we can't do that? But I think that the world of assessment has, it's run away itself a little bit. Is to het up on everything from peer assessed IO psychologists, etc. I think if you think back to 20-30 years ago, we were getting the right people in the right positions, who were staying around for years and years and years, being absolutely productive members of the workforce, and they didn't have to go through all these hurdles. So I think we've got to the point where we're so concerned about assessing the minutiae of somebody's ability that we've actually probably created a bit of a rod for our own backs when it comes to the experience. Yeah,
that feels like a sort of fear of failure thing. Everybody wants to cover their own back, the cost of making a bad hire, all the compliance that's now involved, and therefore people are becoming more and more risk averse, and hiring is perhaps becoming like procurement, where there's more and more hoops to jump through. And actually, as candidates, you have a lot of choice, and there's scarcity of skills out there, and it feels like those companies who are willing to take the risk and be a bit more agile are perhaps going to be the winners out of this. I want to just come back to something you were talking about sort of 5 minutes ago in terms of when you were approached by somebody who says, Martyn, we've got this problem and I want AI to fix it. What are typically the problems that recruiters are coming to you with?
The obvious ones, I'll be honest with you, there's nothing spectacular. The biggest one right now is just the sheer number of applications that are coming in. That is the biggest challenge that recruiters are facing. I had one business who, I was speaking to one business last week that in the last year they've seen a 200% increase in applications. One business saw 300%. It's getting crazy out there. And that's the biggest challenge that people are asking me about. And I get it, LinkedIn DMs, I get emails, just with that question, which is, can you recommend an AI, screening tool that can help us deal with this volume? So that's the biggest challenge. The second one from there is things like communication. as well. So there's probably a top 3 or 4 that people tend to talk to me about. So the application volume is the first one. The second one is data ATS engagement, let's call it. So how do we want to stop spending so much money on recruitment marketing. We want to try and source from our ATS. How do we ensure that data is up to date, is relevant, etc., and communication as well. People are now starting to realise they need to get better at communicating with candidates. So those are kind of the three top challenges people are coming to me about. And just in general, how do we speed up and make it more efficient? But those, I suppose, the top 3 or 4 that people are coming to me about.
And so when they come to you with that question, how often do you find yourself going back and saying, actually, the tech isn't the answer, it's this underlying issue before we get into the tech? How much of your time is sort of spent on that?
Yeah, a lot. So the process that I go through is I have a 1-day workshop that I work with my clients on, and I call it a lightning innovation workshop. And I've done it with in-house teams, I've done it with tech vendors, I've done it with recruitment businesses. And the basis of that is the morning session is all about getting to the nitty-gritty of what the challenges are. So we start listing out the challenges, we start prioritizing them, and we get to kind of lunchtime, and we've got a list of kind of priority A, B, and C challenges. The afternoon is all about creating the solutions for those priority challenges. And most of those solutions tend to be review processes, better communication, more joined up approach internally, better hiring manager meetings, all those kind of things. So I'd probably say about 80% of the solutions that we find just in that lightning innovation workshop are not technology related at all. They're better processes, better communication, better relationships.
I'm really glad you said that. It really chimes true. Any kind of change is always people, process, technology, and as humans, there can be a huge amount of resistance to change, particularly when a problem hasn't been understood and well communicated. So just throwing a fancy new tool in there, and obviously I'm here as a tech vendor. Of course, I want to sell technology solutions, but we want to sell technology solutions that stick and solve the problem, and that are then embedded in the culture and the process, because then you've got a customer relationship for years and years and years. So I wonder, have you seen particular successes? Is there a couple of tools out there or features out there that you've seen that are actually, this is a really, really smart use of AI that really is helping recruitment teams?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and just on your point, look, I'm a AI and automation consultant. It's kind of my main, has been my main role for the last several years. I try my best to put people off of it because I want to make sure that it's absolutely the right option for them. But so look, I've been going on about recruitment chatbots for the last 8 years, and I said that chatbots would change the world, and I was right. ChatGPT is a chatbot; it changed the world. But a lot of people I'm working with are starting to realize that where they see blockers in their process, it's because they can't manage capacity. So if we think about it like this, I did a time and motion study years ago on various in-house teams where we tracked how much time it would take for a recruiter to receive a CV, screen the CV, and have a screening conversation with the candidate and update the ATS. On average, across the board, it was 8 to 9 minutes. And that's the average. So if we use that average and we say, okay, well, if all you're doing is that 9 to 5, I'll give you a break, I'll give you a lunch break. But if that's all you're doing on a daily basis, you'll be able to do 53 of them. That's 265 a week. And if we think about the number of requisitions that recruiters are working on and the number of applications per requisition, we've just realized that their job is impossible because they don't just do that day in, day out either. So when I hear moans and groans about a recruitment process being really poor, candidate experience being really poor, etc., it doesn't come down to a capability issue. It comes to a capacity issue. So when I work with my clients, what we're trying to do is unlock that capacity. And like I said, the biggest challenge right now in the recruitment process is being overwhelmed by the number of applications.
Yeah.
So going to go back to my 8 years of jumping up and down and screaming and shouting. The most obvious answer to that challenge is to get a recruitment chatbot in place to do your initial screening. And there are great tools out there. You know, there's TalkPush, there's Eva, there's Sapia, there's Mercu, etc., Paradox, you know, all of them. You know, they are all out there, and they are all able to help you with the initial screening, because initial screening, it doesn't matter what the role is, it tends to be quite binary. It tends to be, are you in the right location? Are you looking for the right salary? What's your availability? Do you understand the role? And yeah, we can also ask some, you know, some scenario-based style questions as well using chatbots. You know, tell me about a time when you did X, Y, and Z, because the power of large language models and natural language models is that you can actually start understanding those kind of responses and score them quite nicely. So that initial screening, that getting from, oh dear Lord, we've got hundreds upon hundreds of applicants, down to a long list that the recruiter can then concentrate on, is the answer to that challenge.
Yeah, nice examples. And you mentioned earlier the dark side of AI. So I guess the flip side of that question then is, where do you currently see things going wrong? What is it that concerns you about AI within the recruitment sphere?
Oh yeah, I've got some real concerns at the minute. I think that we've seen the magic of ChatGPT, and I kind of hark it back to the Stone Ages, where you know, where shamans and witch doctors, you know, would be able to perform illusions and call it deities and gods and things like that. And people would be wowed, and they prostrate themselves towards these shamans. And we've seen that with ChatGPT a little bit, where because people don't understand how it works, they think it's magic, and they've kind of put a lot of faith in those kind of tools. Now, what that seems to have created for me is some kind of like cognitive reset around our responsibilities, data security responsibilities, governance responsibilities, responsibilities. So, and I think that's the biggest challenge for me, because I hear horror stories of people throwing CVs into ChatGPT to do screening. We can't do that. Firstly, over here in Europe and the UK, it's a GDPR issue. Second of all, most of the regulation out there when it comes to AI, whether that's the EU AI Act, you know, New York law, local law 144, whether it's even GDPR over here, because we don't have any AI regulation, but we do have GDPR, which does absolutely impact the way that we use AI. We cannot use an AI model where we cannot explain how that decision is being made. And you might hear all of this rubbish about, well, you know, I've prompted it. Okay, great. You have prompted it. But when you create a prompt for an image in ChatGPT, it will then give you the image back, and it will tell you what prompt it used, and it's different to the one you put in because it's decided to create a new one that's better. So you don't have any control over the decision-making process. It's what we call a black box algorithm. You have no idea how that algorithm works. That's poor. That's bad. We can't do that, because in most of the regulation, and also just as responsible users, we need to be able to explain how that decision was made. And we can't do that. So that absolutely terrifies me, that we not only are we seeing people doing it, but we're also seeing people who are self-proclaimed influencers and AI experts. And I saw it on LinkedIn the other day. Somebody posted up, I'm so sick of going on these AI for recruitment courses because the first lesson, the first thing that people say is using ChatGPT for screening. Frightening, absolutely frightening. So there is a dark side. You know, and I posted, you know, an article a couple of weeks ago, which is that we need to be in control of the algorithm, you know, or we're going to be straitjacketed by it. So ultimately, that's the bit that terrifies me.
So what can recruiters do about that? How do, you know, if you're terrified by this change, how do recruiters sort of keep up with this pace of innovation and understand the challenges and the opportunities?
So look, you know, we need to be really front and center on AI transformation, because if we allow somebody like IT to do it because it's a technical thing, then we're going to be left in the dust. And what I mean by that is that We get it. We get the nuances on recruitment. We get the fact that what is down on paper doesn't always mean somebody's real capability. We've got, that human level decision making that always comes into recruitment. But that also means that we need to be in control of the algorithms as well. So what recruiters need to do when it comes to AI is they need to be leading the transformation, because they're the ones on the front line. They're the ones. I'll give you an example. Let's say you implement a CV screening tool for AI, and an AI-based CV screening tool, and you hire somebody, but it goes wrong. There's some bias in there, and you get a complaint. That's not a technical issue. That's a hiring problem. That's an ethical problem. That's a legal problem. But it starts with being a hiring problem. And when we talk about that, you mentioned Amazon earlier. There's always that famous story about Amazon's kind of biased hiring of software developers. Nobody talks about it from a technology perspective, but from a hiring perspective. So when it goes wrong, nobody's going to say, what version of Python did somebody use to build this? They're going to say, why didn't the hiring team pick up this? So that's why recruiters need to be front and center and take control of the AI transformation. They need to do it responsibly, ethically, with sound governance around it, but they need to be the ones that are in control of things like decision-making processes, bias audits, all those kind of things.
So where do you think we are a year from now then? I mean, the pace of change seems incredible. 3 months ago, nobody was talking about agentic AI, and now it's every other post on LinkedIn is all about how these agents are going to come along, and you're going to have a workforce of agents alongside your workforce of humans. I guess what's your take on that? What do you see playing out during 2025?
Well, I think we're a little bit away from that, I'll be honest with you, because again, we see a lot of marketing speak about agents. You can have agentic behavior, but we haven't got true agents yet, not in production, not in the workplace, not in our tools, because a true agent is autonomous, doesn't need human input. It decides on the best tools, the best data, the best way to do something. If it doesn't get to the output it needs to, it rethinks and works out how to get there. We don't have that. We do have agentic behavior, which kind of feels that it's an agent, but it's definitely not. And that's fine, because it's still effective tooling, it's still useful, it still makes us more productive, still augments stuff. But we need to get around this kind of marketing fluff that we're hearing a lot of. Now, where I see over the next kind of 12 months, I think what we're going to see is a movement away from kind of individual experimentation, because I think we're still there. I think we still have people who are just, using their own ChatGPT, using their own Gemini, Claude, etc., and kind of playing with that and using that. I think we're just going to start seeing a more robust enterprise adoption of AI, because enterprises work a lot slower than the consumer. So that's why we see a slower pace of adoption. There's a lot more there's a lot more hoops to get through. There's governance, there's legal, like from selling technology into enterprises. So the pace of change is a lot slower. So I just think that we're going to start seeing this natural increase in adoption that's going to happen because people started the process halfway through last year, end of last year, and we'll just start seeing that adoption starting to happen. I think that there's a lot of paralysis around adoption because people are scared of not always having the newest tool. And look, AI, people like myself who help people get AI, we're learning on the trot as well, because things are coming up daily at the minute and we just can't keep up with it. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't actually go for it and implement something, because it doesn't matter whether you're APIing into Llama 3 or Llama 4, or you're APIing into Gemini 2 or 2.5, you're still going to be able to solve a challenge. So I wouldn't worry about not having the latest, greatest. I'd worry about solving your problems. And I think we're just going to see more adoption happening over the next 12 months.
Fantastic. I like the go for it. Feels like a good point to end on there, Martyn.
Absolutely.
Unless there's anything else you want to add, any sort of top tips you would give a recruiter if they were in a lift with you for 2 minutes and said, Martyn, what can you tell me in 2 minutes about AI that I should start with?
I think if I had time in an elevator with a recruiter, I'd say think of the easiest, most low risk, use case that you can think of if you want to think about starting to adopt AI, think about things like FAQ chatbots, because you're not taking personal information. You're really getting basic in there. Prove the value of it. Show that it helps. I was talking to an organization who, over the course of a weekend, they get 800 inbound emails into their recruiter inbox. Public sector organization. Wow. And Monday morning comes and they just like, oh, and it's all just standard FAQ stuff. They've implemented an FAQ chatbot, totally and utterly alleviated. They're automating 85% of their of those inbound queries. Totally and utterly alleviated that stress. Low risk, no personal information, no data processing issues, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They've proven the value of implementing AI. They're now being given budget to do more and more and more. So start low risk, start low complex, start somewhere. Prove the value and go for more investment.
Fantastic. I love that. Martyn, thank you. It's been absolutely fascinating. I feel like I could chat with you about this for another 45 minutes really easily. So I'll have to check in with you in a few months' time and see how the AI landscape is panning out. But yeah, Martyn Redstone, thank you very much indeed.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for inviting me on. Cheers, Neil.
My thanks to Martyn Redstone. It was fascinating chatting with him today. He's such an optimistic person about the potential and the opportunities for AI to really help recruiters. But there's that little tinge of fear out there as well about if we get this wrong. Thank you for joining me. Please visit tribepad.com/theview, where you can subscribe for updates and future episodes.